going to start here today on this butter making thing with a little conversation first about butter and why you should be eating especially grass-fed butter. And then we're going to talk a little bit about milk, and we're going to talk about how to actually make it. And this whole thing will probably not take 30 minutes, I don't think, okay? If you're eating margarine, stop now. If you're eating butter, make sure it's grass-fed. If you can't access cream to make butter yourself, look for Kerrygold at the grocery store. It comes salted and unsalted, and it's an Irish butter that is grass-fed, and it's so worth it. It's so delicious. We're going to make two kinds of butter here today. The first is going to be cultured butter, and I've cultured it with some buttermilk. Traditionally, this is raw milk from our milk club, and traditionally in butter making, they'd have to set the butter aside for a day or two to have enough to be worth churning, so the milk would naturally culture. And by culturing, what I mean is the naturally occurring lactobacilli in the milk will grow, sour it slightly, thicken it slightly, and it will improve the flavor of the butter. Okay? So that's the traditional reason behind culturing butter. Now, in the United States, we find it's just easier to stir in a tablespoon or two of buttermilk and allow it to culture at room temperature for, depends on the cream, but anywhere from 6 to 12 hours. Okay? So when you make cultured butter, the liquid that remains behind is buttermilk. It's important to pay attention to this point because you'll want to save that liquid, because buttermilk is good for baking, it's good for using in fermentation if you're making sauerkraut, it's good to use in all kinds of places like that. Also in home butter making, you're going to find that you must salt it because the salt helps pull the whey out, and it's the whey that makes the butter go rancid. The buttermilk or the skim milk is what makes the butter go rancid, okay? So we're going to make this butter first, this cultured butter first. What's going to happen is I'm going to put the cream in here and just turn it on, and it'll go to whipped cream, and then it'll go past whipped cream, and then we'll take it and put it in the ice water to work it to wash out the skim milk, okay? So pardon the noise, it's going to be unpleasant, I think, I'm afraid. You may be interested to know that you're going to get about a pound of butter from about a quart of cream. In my house, a pound of butter will last 2 weeks. So I don't worry too much about salting it super heavily because it never lasts long enough to go rancid. If you want to, you can freeze it after you make it, salted or unsalted. And see how kind of thick that is? Because commercial milk has been pasteurized, it doesn't sour, it rots. But this has soured naturally, and that's a good thing. Do you hear the sound changing? Now you can start to see the butter flecks moving. What you hear is the butter coming around the spinning blades. Let's have a look in here and see what we got. Yeah, we're at whipped now. We've got to go a little further. But you can hear the difference in the sound of the machine, can't you, as it starts to work? You can use a food processor to do this. You can use a regular blender. It might take longer. And if you use a regular blender, probably a really good idea not to overload it, not to put too much in it, because the motor's not quite as strong as the Vitamix motor is. You can also do it in a hand mixer, with a hand mixer in a bowl. Whip it past whipped cream and just keep going until you start seeing the flecks of butter. And you can do it by putting the cream in a jar, shaking the jar. I mean, You can be as low tech as you want to be here. Okay. So now we're going to pour off the liquid. So this would be your buttermilk, right? And even if you're not planning to drink this, I really strongly recommend that you save it. It can go back in the freezer, and you'll want to use it in bread and pancakes and cakes and other kinds of cooking like that. So I got this much butter. Can you see? And some that fell in the bowl here, so I'll fish that out. And now I'm going to, one problem with making it in this Vitamix is that it tends to heat things up a little bit. So what I'm going to do is pour it into this bowl of ice water. And now you're going to begin to wash the butter. So all I'm doing is pressing, 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 and you see I've got my spatula in there, sinking, sinking. I want all this beautiful butter to get as cold as possible, and then once it's a little more cohesive, I'll start to press on it with the spatula. And what this washing is doing is taking out that residual buttermilk, which is what makes the butter go bad. You can see this isn't exactly skilled labor. Now I'm going to add a little salt there. And I'm going to use, I'm going to use a teaspoon per pound. I'm just going to eyeball this. Thanks. Sprinkle it on there. Again, you're going to mix some more. What I'm doing, if you can't see, is I'm pressing it up against the side of the bowl to press out the liquid. And when you see me sweeping my hand around, I'm recapturing any little errant pieces of butter that have escaped. There is ice in here. It's quite cold. And normally I would be doing this at a sink with running water, because you can see that the water is pretty milky. Can you see that? If I lift it any higher, I'll spill it. Because I'd want to be keeping an eye on, if you're running cold water into this bowl, you can keep track of when the water starts to run clear. It means you've pressed all the buttermilk out. That was about 2 cups of cream, I think, so this is going to be about a half a pound of butter. And at this point, this is kitchen parchment. Put it on there, roll it up, and pull. Because what you're doing is shaping, right? You're just pulling it to make it nice and round and even. Fold those ends in. And if I was going to put this in the freezer now, I would put this little roll inside a freezer bag, right? But that's a half a pound of butter, and it took me that long. Okay? For more information on making butter at home, feel free to check out our website at www.motherearthnews.com, where you'll find this video and lots of other stories on making butter at home.